Hello and welcome to the Profit Express. I'm Tim Healy, and I'm inviting you to join me each and every Wednesday so you can be prepared to win the battle for business. Now, I know you're out there, you're closing deals, you're making money, you're turning prospects into profits. So I got to make it worth your while. That's why I have on the kind of guests that you can listen, learn, and earn from. So, as always, thanks so much for being on board today. Now, you and I know that winning the battle for business is never easy. But think about it this way. What if you were one of the remaining 1% of shoe manufacturers in the United States? And then add on top of that, you have a deep commitment to making eco-friendly products. Well, in my opinion, I think you're a lot more than just a shoe company. That's why I'm very, very excited to have on today's guest. And she is Sara Irvani. And she's the CEO of Okabashi Brands. And the story starts in the 1980s when her grandfather came to the U.S. from Iran and opened Okabashi in Buford, Georgia. At the time, 60% of shoes were manufactured in the U.S. Today, it's down to 1%. Now, I'm having Sara on not just because it's a great Made in America story, which I'm always passionate about the Made in America story, but she is also committed. Okabashi is committed to making eco-friendly products and therefore ultimately committing to the customer. So her story is one that is rich in a lot of elements that you and I need to listen, learn, and earn from as we are headed in the journey of looking to win the battle for business each and every day. So it's a great pleasure to have on board CEO of Okabashi Brands, Sara Irvani. Sara, how are you today?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to participate.
Well, listen, I'd love to have you on. I came across your story on Instagram, and I started to do a little digging, and I went to the website. And I got to be honest, it was that video you have, like, on the website, our story. A lot of companies have. So I kind of dug into that, and then I saw the video that you did, talking about the company, and there was a quick clip of you and your dad in there. And listen, I fell in love with it. I reached out to you guys, and here you are. So again, thanks for being on board today.
Well, it's been a fun experience for me in the last 5 years, and it's been great to be able to work with a team who's been making shoes for nearly 40 years.
And not just making shoes. If I have my research right, is it what about 35, 40 million pairs of shoes you guys have made?
Yes.
Wow,
Um,
that's
part
incredible.
of Definitely, and part of the thing that we hold as such an important aspect of our work is that, not only are we making sustainably American made shoes, but we're
Mhm.
doing it in a way that is accessible. So, how can you bring a shoe that, quite often one would see and think that there is $100 plus price point at closer to a 20 to $50 price point?
Well, that's certainly a lot of what we're gonna dig in today because I would love to get your perspective as a CEO who is a part of that remaining 1% of shoe manufacturers in the U.S., which that alone I think is an incredible statistic. But let me start off with this question, Sarah. Obviously, the role of the CEO is to lead the company in what's in the best interest of the company, the employees, and the customers. So, why wouldn't you, or wouldn't it be easier just to go offshore? Wouldn't it be cheaper just to go offshore in the long run? Why are you guys holding strong to Made in America at this point?
It's interesting, I grew up with my father running this company, and so anyone who um, has a family member in business will know that dinner table conversations are just as much about business as about anything else.
Right.
And so growing up, I'm an 80s baby, but in the 90s, when we really saw the vast majority of this offshoring taking place, multiple times a week. Um, you know, Whether it be potential customers, partners, employees, just interested parties would come and ask my father the same thing. Why aren't you moving offshore? Why aren't you moving offshore? It's a question that I still get regularly today.
Mhm.
And yes, penny for penny, it might be marginally cheaper to do that. Um, but, if we zoom out to say, well, how did we get here in the first place? My grandfather was the largest footwear manufacturer in the Middle East in the 1970s. Not a political family, but with the revolution, businesses got nationalized. And
Mm-hmm.
when we're looking to restart, he really saw um, Georgia as a place to do it and started up the factory. And he was an unusual businessman. So the Wall Street Journal, for example, ran a front page article for him on him in the 1970s. They said the article was about, gender pay parity. So they said,
Hmm.
well, who is this bizarre businessman who pays women as much as men? And
Wait,
so
he did
just
that. Look, your grandfather did that in the 70s and the 80s when he came here?
yes, and in Iran as well. I mean, he's sort of very much a feminist and very much,
Wow.
beyond that, just believing in treating people well and treating people with respect. And, you know, wherever he could, he went above and beyond. And this was sort of before we sort of, I think, talk about culture as some sort of business aspect, just really the human aspect of it. So when he set up the company here and sort of a new start, very much sort of like an American dream aspect, um, and my father took it over. Well, with the offshoring and sort of customers looking for cheaper cost base for their products, my father was faced with the same question. Of course, he could save a couple of pennies if he closed down the factory, but he made a commitment to his team that he took very seriously. He wanted to be able to walk the factory living in Atlanta, want to be
Mhm.
able to walk the factory, understand how people are being treated, not just read about it in some report twice a year, but
Mm.
to really have relationships. And there's joy in that. And there needs to be joy in business as well. And to see what quality of materials are being made, the design, and really, be truly vertically integrated, be truly local, be engaged in the community. And, when a lot of people went offshore, they didn't open up their own factories. A lot of them didn't. They just closed down their own factories that they owned and then, bought the shoes from someone else without that
Mm.
sense of ownership and equally the responsibility. So, when I started 5 years ago, I take that responsibility equally seriously and look up to the example of my father and my grandfather and how can I um, continue it.
So you've really so my first question was, hey, why wouldn't it be cheaper and easier to offshore? And you've really been preparing to answer that question since you were a kid. Like you said, family-owned business. You have these conversations around the dinner table, and certainly your father had to endure that question many, many times. And wow,
Yes, and sorry, go ahead.
no, no. You know what's interesting, and it's really as much as it is about made in America for your family and the brand. It's also about the human aspect, like you're saying, paying women equally back in the '80s. That's very forward thinking, and so
Yeah.
you guys are more than a shoe company.
Well, yes, and I think it is just super important. And there are some things in business that you don't see, you know, not going to show up on your P&L penny for penny.
Right, right.
Um, but I think I'm a big believer, and this is beyond business as well. If you're a good person doing good things and you consistently try and work at
Hmm.
it, good things come your way. Um, you know, for all of the challenges of sort of reworking the footwear industry and ecosystem in the US, because all the factories closed down, but so did all of the entire ecosystem. And our
Sure.
competition just became so much cheaper. So for all of the effort of making it work and now being able to really lean in and grow, um, I think that if we would have closed down and if that those values wouldn't have been there,
Hmm.
we would have been still, I would like to say, made out of sustainable materials, um, comfortable, a lot of these other material properties. There's also the risk that that you would be sort of generic in some way as
Mm,
well. Um, Both in how we treat our team, not in any other way different to others, but also in the marketplace. And I think that, you know, if I think about your audience and decisions that they're making, quite often says, well, everyone else is doing it this way. This is how I should do it. It's dollars cheaper or even
mm.
just cents cheaper. I think that, risk of being generic is a really big risk in today's marketplace across categories.
So, wow. So even if you had made quote unquote, what some people would call sound business decisions, sound fiscal decisions, you think you would have potentially risked, the flavor, the brand, the culture of what Okabashi is all about. Is that what I'm hearing?
Definitely. And I
Yeah.
think that part of the advantage when you start a business and when you look at a business, also, we live in a world with a lot of different funds and private equity funds. What is the timeline? What is the purpose of the business? Is it something that someone wants to build, create, sell, and flip? Is it, fun with a
Mm.
10-year life cycle? This is a third generation business. We want to be able to make it a fourth generation business. And I think having the luxury of those types of timelines allows us to make a different set of decisions as well.
How important? So again, your location, your factory is in Buford, Georgia, and that was is it
Mhm.
the original location from when your grandfather came here?
It is, and
It
it's the
is.
same location as sort of being a little girl and just following my father about.
Oh
Um,
man.
so I know the drive up to the factory very well. It is amazing though to see how this area, we're in Gwinnett County outside of Atlanta,
Right.
45 minutes from sort of, let's say, Midtown Atlanta.
Mhm.
This area has transformed.
Yeah.
And it's really amazing to see how Georgia is really evolving, particularly in the last 2 years, I would say. Um, the quality of life here, the weather, from business side, the um, infrastructure and support, the logistics, all of that have sort of really come together. And I'm excited for the next 5 years in Buford, and I think it'll be um, really quite different again from today's
Oh,
version.
absolutely. The Southeast, the Carolinas, Georgia in particular, how it looked in the 80s versus today, it's almost unrecognizable. I actually have family in the Carolinas and Georgia. My brother-in-law is in Alpharetta, not too far from you guys. And we were down there this past fall. So yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. Now, all right. So let me ask you. So you remember the factory from when you were a girl, and you would walk it as a girl. Um, so now, fast forward, you're the CEO. How important is it for you to be able to walk that floor, that manufacturing floor? How important is it for you to be able to, you know, have a conversation, have a cup of coffee with the people on the line, with your people?
I think that it's one of my greatest sources of joy. We spend so much time in work
Mhm.
that, if you enjoy the company of your team members and um, are able to spend that time together and face to face as well, it makes all of the difference. And it, from a business perspective, it's paramount. You have to know what's going on, get a sense, and create non-meeting time to do so. I think my
Mm.
calendar, though, if you saw it, you would definitely understand that, like many other people, I've fallen victim to the Zoom meetings. Um, but it's to have that unstructured time and that joy and that interaction, and also learning. I have a philosophy background. I'm not. Um, an engineer. I don't have welding experience. I'm, not a logistics mastermind. And so you know, it's good for the business, but on the personal front, it's definitely the biggest joy that I have in my work.
It's funny as you're telling that, I can see your face change, Sarah. Your eyes are lighting up. I can just tell how much you must really enjoy, those moments of being able to walk the floor. So if we stay on the employees for a little bit,
Mhm.
and again, today's guest, Sara Irvani, she's the CEO of Okabashi Brands. They are one of the remaining 1% of U.S. shoe manufacturers located down in Buford, Georgia. So you had said, and again, I think it was on the video, and I was doing some of the research for the show today. You proudly said, correct me if I'm wrong, 63% of your workforce are women, and I believe
Mhm.
also you have a women's leadership team.
Mhm.
As part of your infrastructure, if you will. So here's my question for you. So, first of all, you're third generation, which is a very tough thing to do in family owned businesses. Not a lot of family owned businesses make it to the third generation. So, that in itself, congratulations. But it
Thank you.
started with your grandfather, then to your father, and now to you. So, what what do you add or what do you do differently or approach differently as a female CEO than perhaps your dad did it or your grandfather did it?
I don't know if it can be attributed to my gender, um, but driving to school with my father, he'd often have different expressions and learnings and teachings.
Mhm.
Um, there are a few that have stuck in my head. One is smile at the world and the world will smile back at you, which for years I just took as a superficial saying. And over the last probably decade, I've started to understand it at the much deeper level.
Mhm.
And then the other one is the more the more you know nothing. Um, and I know nothing. And so to come into this business, granted, I knew the factory, I knew the people, but to come into this business in this role, I knew that I had a lot of listening to do to
Mm.
the industry, to
Mhm.
understand what's going on, to the people, to what is driving complexity, what is driving um, morale, what are all the different factors. And so, really, for the first 6 months in particular, just listening, what does everyone else think that we should do? Studying the marketplace, saying, okay, what are the hypotheses that I want to test out in our strategy to be able to bring the company to the next level? And I think that, that active listening often gets cast as a traditionally feminine trait. And I think that that's something that has really helped me on this journey significantly, is just bringing people together,
Mhm.
approaching with open ears and a view to collaborate,
Mhm.
not to dominate.
I love the fact that you mentioned listening. Listening to me is, I mean, we hear a lot about it, in the world today in social media. Books are written about it, but it's a very hard tool to master. And then you not just said listen, you said active listening. So I'm guessing, and I just known you for a little while right now, but you pay close attention to how you communicate, and active listening is quite the skill set. And so my question was, how do you approach it differently as a female CEO who's taken over from your father and grandfather? And uh, yeah, it's I think women do have, which I think is one of the benefits of a diverse workplace. And you said 63% of the workforce is female. Um, a greater ability, just naturally, innately, who knows, to listen and empathize, which I think can do wonders for communication in the workforce.
Yes, and it's a communication, self-awareness, listening. These are all continuous improvement um,
Mhm.
areas, and there's sort of an asymptote, I would say, to all of them. It's um, it's been exciting to get better and better, and you know, last 2 years. I'm not going to mention necessarily the P word, but it's been a good time to to work on all three of those aspects as individuals and then also,
Right.
of course, as leaders.
So now, if you talk about the decision to be made in the U.S., obviously cost is a part of that factor. We all know that it just is what it is.
Mhm,
And you've also made a deep commitment to sustainability, to recycled materials, to eco-friendly
mhm.
products. Um, how so it obviously has the economic benefit. I assume it's one of the big things that helps you remain a manufacturer in the US. Is that a safe assumption?
Yes, I think that sustainable practices, for
Mhm.
example, in-house recycling, etc., should support a business model and not be a incremental cost to it.
So then if it's part of the economic decision, which is smart, then also, um, with, especially the millennial generation, if you will, and the younger generations, they seem to have more of a focus on, products that do the right thing, companies that do the right thing, companies that are transparent. And, so you've made that, the sustainability effort, the eco-friendly product effort, as part of your focus. And you've also, which I think was very interesting, and I want to get your take on this. You decided to launch a brand under the Okabashi umbrella, if you will, called Third Oak, that is specifically designed towards the millennial demographic. How did you come to that decision?
Well, I think that looking at both the trends on an aesthetic basis, something sleek and
Mhm.
um, very versatile, that goes with the sort of whole host of wardrobes, fits perfectly into what we make. And I think that what people are lacking quite often is attention span. So, one of the challenges that we have, and also many, many other companies have, is well, I can talk about our story in terms of the origin of the company. I can talk about the material, where it is made, what it is made for, recycled content. I can talk about the comfort level. I can talk about the practicality, the slip resistance, the machine washability.
Mhm.
I can, there's so many different aspects that I can talk about that would um, almost overwhelm um, a consumer if I tried to have one brand that appealed to everyone. You can't be everything to everyone.
Right,
And
right.
so Third Ink is really the chance to say, let's hone this dialogue and make it more targeted and more clear and sort of answer a lot of the needs and the questions that are in the marketplace around sustainable footwear um, for
Mhm.
that conscious consumer who's looking for something sleek and sustainable.
Now, when did you, launch Third Oak?
About 3 years ago.
About 3 years ago. So then so it it seems like a very smart decision, and again, I don't know the manufacturing world in doing what I do. So then it's really what you said, and I really want the listeners to grab a hold of that, was a brand can only be so many things to so many people. And if you try to be everything to everybody, we can't do that. You're gonna fail. You're gonna miss out on a lot of different people. So you made the decision, and listen, there's risk involved. I'm sure that, that there's other investments to launch a line, to market a line, et cetera, to that millennial group. So it's been 3 years. How would you rate its success so far? How are millennials responding to Third Oak?
I think that they're responding really well to it. It's also been exciting to see, J. Crew. We
Hmm.
did 2 collections with them as brand we love, which was super
Really?
exciting. Yeah.
Wow! Listen, you almost say that nonchalant, like, "Oh yeah, J. Crew." That's great news. Partnering with them.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it's been an exciting ride, and what I'm most excited about is to see the level of understanding and nuance and
Hmm.
of the consumer um, increase to such an extent. I mean, you talked about transparency. In
Hmm.
today's world, you're either going to be transparent yourself and shine a light on your operations and your product, or you're going to have a light shined on it. And I think part of the reason why we're able, to talk to the customers in the way that we do is, this is not a synthetic new company that has just put on paper its values because it's trendy to do so. It is
Hmm.
not a marketing gimmick. We have lived, we have fought for our values. I've we've got nearly 40 years to prove to it. And I
Hmm.
think that with that, across the board, not just about thought out, but across the board, having more conscious consumers, they can tell when there's legacy and when there's authenticity in a brand and a product and when there is not. So I think that um, a lot of um, the praise should go to the team and then to also the foundations which we're building on today.
Well, like you said, today's consumer is very aware, and
Mhm.
you can't BS the genuineness of it. And like you said, you have a 40-year track record of being committed to Made in America, now being committed to sustainability and eco-friendly products. Um, so here's an interesting question, Sarah. Let's have some fun with this one. If is
Love it. I'm excited.
well, wait for the question, then you could tell me you're excited. So, if you could talk to any other business leader out there today, any other business leader, who would it be and why?
I recently heard Ross Brewer from Walgreens speak, the CEO.
Mm,
Um, I thought she was incredibly compelling. We've been working with Walgreens also for over 25 years.
wow.
Um, and I would talk to her probably less on the macro business environment,
Mhm, mhm.
more on tactical methods um, to organize
Right.
and to um, create both a defensive and offensive team.
Wow.
And sort of, yeah, I think that that organization to run an organization like Walgreens
Mhm.
is incredibly complex. And if you look at the results, she's doing an incredible job. And her composure, her presence, I just found it incredibly inspiring. So that's who I'd love to speak with.
Well, good answer.
And
I
also
like
thank
that.
you for the partnership as well.
Yeah, and so you've been working with them for 25 years, you said?
Mhm.
Wow.
And
Now
this is also an example. There are a lot of what's interesting in today's marketplace, and this goes back to, what people are talking about, what they're doing and not. There are a lot of also retailers that have been supporting purpose-driven brands um, before it was quote unquote cool. For Walgreens to opt for Made in America all these
Mhm.
years when, 2002, I would say perhaps Made in USA wasn't as big of a thing as it was now. And for them to consistently do that, I think it's fun to be in business and to see who really cares.
Now, I guess maybe it's just something, personally in me. I love Made in America. I think to be an economic power, you have to have strong manufacturing, in my opinion. Um,
Mhm.
do you see in general, I mean, you're in shoe manufacturing in particular, but do you see um, it beginning to turn? What do you see in the next 3 to 5 years with manufacturing in the U.S., whether it is specifically in shoe or clothing or in general?
I do think that there's more attention to it and that there will be a growth of domestic manufacturing. I think that there are significant capacity constraints
Mm,
um, right now with all of the COVID situation. Sorry, I mentioned it finally,
that's it.
but we
That's
got
just,
through without mentioning the pandemic, which is good. Um,
no worries.
you know, the government roles and shutting down factories abroad um, has really highlighted the risk. So I do think that there is more attention to it. I I think that it will not be overnight.
Mm,
There
mhm,
is
mhm.
infrastructure that needs to be built to be able to perform against it. I think that there are going to be certain industries that will be easier than others.
Right.
Um, and I think that that's going to be directly correlated to, you know, how um, sensitive is the supply chain,
Yeah.
how people intensive is the work as well.
Mhm.
Um, and also, what does the global uh, landscape for that particular market look like?
True.
So if if it's something that's super specialized, I think it's easier for the US to develop a new market and then really lead in that manufacturing. I think what's very challenging is take footwear, for example, and I referred to this earlier.
Mhm.
All of the ecosystem around footwear has disappeared here. So we work with a
Yeah.
number of different suppliers where we're their only footwear customer. And so you have to really build it up from scratch. And I think that we will continue to see prices, especially landed prices, taking into consideration freight um, of imported goods increase. So I think that the price difference is going to decrease between imported and domestically made product.
Well, listen, I have to say, as I said, I originally came across you guys on Instagram, and correct me if I'm wrong, with your team, there's somebody over there, I don't know if it was you, I think I saw, something you guys had posted on Instagram saying, "Here's the good news," I'm paraphrasing, "Here's the good news, buying Okabashi shoes, if your order won't get delayed on a dock somewhere." D does that ring a
Yes.
bell? Did you guys post something like that?
Yes. I think the
Okay.
team had a lot of fun with that one.
That was when I read that, I'm like, "That is awesome. That is a really good message and well played, so congrats to your team." Um,
Thank you.
Listen, this conversation is a conversation I could just go on about with you. Um, it's and I'm not just trying to say this to make you feel good as my guest today, but you guys really are more than a shoe company. And,
Thank you.
I didn't know everything about your grandfather's story, but, paying women equal wage back in the 80s, that's incredible, and it speaks to your culture. So, let me end it with this one then. What is it as the CEO of Okabashi that you are most proud of?
Well, that's an easy question. I thought it was
Oh,
going to be a trick.
okay,
I
all right,
was
all
ready.
right.
I was
I'm gonna give you
ready.
that
No,
one, and then I got another
no,
one. All right, answer that
no,
one. Go
you've
ahead.
given it. You've given it. Okay, so I think that what I am most proud and excited about is that we've been able to create more opportunities for people. I mean, we've really created a meaningful amount of jobs. I mean, even in the last 2 years. And I
Mm,
think that growing that positive community impact for me, and that goes back also to be able to have conversations with people and form personal relationships um, is such a joy. And also not only, stagnant jobs, but
mm,
jobs where, and I think that this is the promise of manufacturing, where there is such a strong upwards mobility relating to it. And to see one promotion lead to another, lead to another, lead to another, um, you know, someone who, maybe started on more of a temporary basis managing 50 people, for example.
right, right.
And to see stories like that, that's what brings me so much joy and what I'm most proud of.
Okay. All right. Now I'm not letting you off the hook. Okay. So here's the last question, and that was a great answer. All right. If you had a do over,
Ah.
ah, what would it be? Now I got you thinking.
Yes, exactly. I tend to be by personality a more forward-looking person than past. One, I mean that's a sign of a good question if it gives pause for thought. I would probably I'm I'm not sure. I think I commuted for the first 2 years. I was living in New York at the time and commuted down to the factory. I would
Right.
have probably moved closer to the factory as I live now a few years ago to be able to spend, um, more time here. I think that would probably be it, but,
Okay.
um, I've yeah, that's it.
That's it. Look, I never know how anybody's going to answer the question, but I throw it out for the, my classic do-over question, well, clearly you enjoy walking the floor. You even have memories that take you back to when you were a girl walking the floor with your dad, which is fantastic. Um, Listen, I want to thank you for sharing your time today. As I start off every show, my mission on the show is to help the listeners, the followers win the battle for business. It's not an easy thing. You grew up in the business. You saw how your grandfather and father did it. Now you're at the helm as CEO. Um, and you shared a lot of great ideas to help my listeners today. So I want to thank you for that. Um, People to get in contact with you, to follow Okabashi, how can they do it?
Best thing is probably the Instagram. We also, yeah, we're active.
There you go. Well, listen, Sarah, it was great to have you on. It was a real pleasure, and I enjoyed it. Thank you so much today.
Thank you so much.
So this is the Profit Express. And remember, each and every Wednesday, we have new amazing episodes downloading, just like the one with today's guest, Sara Irvani, who's the CEO of Okabashi Brands, an amazing, incredible made in America story, an eco-friendly story, so many dimensions. Great story, multi-generational. So make sure you check it out when it downloads next Wednesday. And as always, we have to thank those who support the show, Corbett Public Relations. They are promoting and protecting businesses and brands for over 30 years. So please visit my good friends at CorbettPR.com. That's CORBETT.PR.com. And of course, you can follow the show on Instagram at The Profit Express, on Twitter at Profit_Express, and the Profit Express page on Facebook. And until next week, do one more thing today than you did yesterday to help you win that battle for business. Until next time.